call the meeting to order at 4:06. We have Bob Bastinto and Roy Gott co-chairs. We have Tom Toll. We have Mike Summerer, and we will be later on adding Mark Perka as a member of the committee. Guests Jeff Nevins from Mission Broadband, Crystal Groff, and Kendra Jo Brindle from Maine Connectivity Authority. Review and approval of prior meeting minutes, June 28, 2023. Has everybody had a chance to look over those?
Yep.
We have a motion on those minutes.
Move approval.
Second.
Motion and a second to approve minutes as written. Any discussion? Hearing none. All those in favor?
Aye.
Aye. Thank you. Update of action steps from prior meeting, feedback from select board outreach. I was at both select board meetings. Is it really? No, it was last week. Didn't it? And I know Mike and Tom, you were both at the Gouldsboro meeting. Sandy and Steve Rebel were at the Winter Harbor meeting. I don't remember if we had anybody else. Certainly Peter Drinkwater was there as well. And in both cases, there were good questions asked, and the select boards were in favor of handing off the documents that we presented to their lawyers to have them reviewed. And they were fine with the idea of entering into the interlocal agreement as long as was stated in a couple cases, as long as it didn't cost them anything. They were not authorized to expend any funds on this endeavor. And I passed on our offer to be able to fund the legal review. And so that has, I can't guarantee that it's happened in Winter Harbor, that it's been handed off to the lawyers, but certainly in Gouldsboro, Eve told me yesterday, the lawyer said, look, we can look over it. We suggest you reach out to MCA because maybe they could answer your question better. So it's not really a question that we have. We just want to make sure that it's that the interlocal agreement is something that looks good and not bad for the town from the perspective of lawyers. So there may be some back and forth there, but they're going to certainly Gouldsboro is going to try and have this back so they can do next steps at their next board meeting in another week. And so that's where we are on the select board outreach. Any thoughts, Mike and Tom, where you were present for that evening?
Thought it went well. I was actually surprised at the level of support from the Gouldsboro Select Board, and I'm glad it's moving forward.
I don't have anything new.
All right. So, Mark, I started without you just to get things off and rolling. We did the minutes and the roll call, and you heard the tail end of the report out for the select board outreach there. We do have our next community outreach. I did get confirmation. We have access to Peninsula School for that, for the evening of July 25th. It's a Tuesday. And that's not a night that has a big conflict with Schoodic Arts for All. It's not a night that has a conflict with either select board. And Kathy is aware of the dates, and we'll make sure that we reach out to the select board as well, through the town office, to encourage them to show up if they haven't already, so they can get the full presentation.
That's at 6:30.
That's at 6:30, and I've gotten 2 RSVPs from one household so far. It's a couple that have been at the Winter Harbor outreach, so they'll be a repeat customer. And so again, based on the number of RSVPs, as we approach that, we'll determine what I'm going to pick up for food. But I figure one small tray of sandwiches and probably 2 pizzas again, depending on the number of people, and we'll go from there. Bottled water, limited snacks like before. And of course, we'll have a little bit more substantial information to share with them at that meeting than we've had at the prior ones, hopefully. So any thoughts for the next outreach?
Will it be the same presentation or will it have tweaks?
It's going to have tweaks. Any new information, for example, now that we know more concretely than we did before the road miles, and we've got an estimate, we can throw some basic numbers out there. If we do, as I know Jeff has mentioned about identifying areas that are grant eligible versus not grant eligible. I don't remember who said there was going to be updated mapping data to help identify that, but that's something that, if we have any of that information ready to present, we can certainly include that. The more I think we have, the better. Jeff?
We'll take that one, and with the new mapping data, we'll do the analysis again. We have the information from the prior go around where we did the mapping of both Gouldsboro and Winter Harbor, but we'll do the update and we'll have those numbers for you before you get together again.
Okay, thank you. So that's next outreach. General RFP updates. Did you get that document shared, Jeff?
I did.
All right.
Yeah, Roy, thank you. So now it's back in my court.
Okay.
So I think I can give you the update.
All right.
I'll work on it tomorrow morning and get it back to you with the changes that you made and the rewrite of the executive summary.
Mm-hmm.
I'll make all those changes and send it back to you tomorrow.
Okay.
I'm a part-timer at Mission Broadband, so I don't usually say I'm on vacation, but I'm off for the next week, starting tomorrow in the afternoon through the 20th.
Okay.
But so I will get it back to you so you all can see it and then review it. And if there's any questions, send them to us. And if there's any changes, obviously too.
If the committee doesn't have anything substantial for changes, is there anything, obviously you're going to be out for a little bit, but is there anything we should do to begin the process of publishing that RFP?
No, we need to talk about the schedule.
Okay.
And develop the timeline.
Okay.
And JD will be covering for me while I'm out. So I will talk to him tomorrow and tell him and, copy him on any correspondence that comes back to Mission.
Okay.
And he'll take care of that and get you folks moving in the direction of getting a timeline together and then getting this RFP out so you can move on to the next step.
Okay. I think this is as good a place as any to ask the questions I had sent out to the committee. So this is a little bit more discussion wise here, but the thought occurred to me that it might be helpful to have some plan for partitioning the project or segmenting it into, based on the mapping data, the areas and the where is identified as unserved versus underserved, or whatever the case may be, to create some priority areas that if it looks like we're going to not get grant funding or not get enough to make the project viable as the following the model of DBU, is there a way to incorporate language in the RFP to identify segments of the network to be treated potentially separately? And that's maybe a question to start off with Jeff.
Roy, can
obviously,
you
obviously
expound?
the ideal is that we would have the whole project, and the whole project would be able to, have enough grant funding because it's hitting enough unserved areas to be grant eligible, that we could do the whole project and not have to worry. But it may be the case that depending on what the grant funding is, we might not be able to make this self-sufficient because it is a large network and there might be large swaths that are not grant eligible. So if we were as a committee to try to include language again in the RFP for the respondents to sort of treat obviously the project as a whole, but also to be able to sort of have smaller chunks of the network that could be as sort of like ad alternates, except, does that make sense at all? So we didn't need to do the entire project. We could do certain specific segments, if that makes sense. Or is
I'm
that
not sure. Yeah, I'm trying to think of how we would position that in terms of, so the people that are responding to it would understand they're first of all, they're going to go do their own mapping, very likely before they respond.
Yeah.
So they'll know the areas that are eligible. They'll know the areas that aren't eligible.
But we should have some idea of where the pockets of eligible versus ineligible will be before this goes out, wouldn't you think? Or no?
You'll know, yes, you will know the areas.
Okay. So I'm
They-
just thinking,
The only thing that I'm thinking is that
Mhm.
they're going to have to design the network. I'm not sure how they would design a network with fiber that could hop and just serve certain pockets. I think that you're going to have to get a total design and then figure out what the cost of that is. And then you will have to back out those areas that are ineligible.
Okay.
And that's where you will have to find funding outside of grant money from MCA or any other source, quite likely.
Yeah.
And that will be part of what you as a utility will have to take on as the part that will be borrowed, if you will.
right.
Whether it's a bond or you do it through bank financing, however you choose to do it.
Mhm.
That money would go towards the areas that are not eligible. And then the grant funding could only be spent on the eligible areas.
Right. So my thought process, hold on a second, we've got a question chat. Okay. Mike had to leave. Go ahead, Bob.
Yeah, so you're looking for a plan A and a plan B.
I'm
In
looking,
essence.
so for example, I think it makes sense no matter what, to have a loop that originates up on Route 1, wherever we, like, for example, the DOT lot, if we think that's where the most logical place is to put our building that's going to house the equipment. So a loop that sort of starts there, goes down West Bay, through Prospect Harbor, through Birch Harbor, up through West Gouldsboro, back up to Route 1 and back around. I think in my mind, that we're going to have fiber along that entire circuit, if you will, to reach practically everybody else. Pond Road is not useful because there's a gap of about a mile or so in the middle without any utilities. Because for one of the requests in the RFP language is redundancy. And rather than just being dead end runs of fiber, I'm assuming if we have some sort of a loop, that will help with redundancy. So I would assume they might do that sort of a design in the first place. But that doesn't mean we necessarily flesh out the network all the way through that area. So I would assume there's sort of a core backbone of the network, and then to prioritize the grant eligible stuff first, the sections that are grant eligible that connect to that, because we won't be able to sell this to the voters unless it is likely to not incur any tax impact. And to do that, whatever the borrowing is, for whatever reason, whether it's our match or for the grant, or whether it's the unserved and grant ineligible, or just the grant ineligible sections, if what's going to be paid back is going to happen too fast for us to pay it back with subscriber fees, that's going to have tax impact, and it's not going to get past the voters. So yes, technically a plan B, but plan A being the whole thing, and plan B being these priority sections that are most grant eligible.
Right.
So would
Okay.
it be the case that we would typically, you say, back out those areas, Jeff? So after the RFP is placed, I mean, some company's going to do a proposal, and that's going to, if there's no specification, that we might want to tease out some of the already reasonably served areas. If that's not in the RFP, then they're going to be assuming that it's the whole project and nothing but the whole project, right? To tease those parts out, they're going to probably say, well, that's going to change our math. That might change our proposal. Is that not correct?
Trying to think logistically of how that would work and how we would ask for it.
Mark, was that you raising your hand by any chance? Okay. I don't know that it doesn't, you can certainly think on it. I'm just thinking,
Yeah.
if we know going into the process that there are specifically served areas and unserved areas that are not eligible for grants, that might be eligible for grants, that we might try to partition up the project into just sections, or ask, if they're going to be doing their own, we can provide our ideas, or we could include language asking them to define segments that are currently unserved for prioritization. I don't know. I don't know
Yeah.
what the answer is.
Roy, let me give that some thought, because
Okay.
we've got to, I think we need to give the potential respondents clear guidance on what it is that you're asking for.
Mhm.
And if we're going to do two things, which I think is what I'm hearing you say, the first one would be to do both towns in their entirety. And then the second, if I'm hearing what you're saying right, is you would pull out only those areas that are grant eligible, and you would do those areas only.
That would be, we would prioritize those areas and act on those first, with perhaps deferring to a later time the others. And
And with that, the engineers that would be doing the response to the RFP would have to take a look at how they would best engineer that in terms of where the backbone goes, and how they build the network.
right. And that's why I think the backbone needs to be in place for the whole network. Like the plan A backbone is the plan B backbone, but the smaller runs, the side streets and all that stuff, that would be what would be different in plan B. Kendra, Joe, you had your hand up.
Can you hear me okay?
I can.
Okay. Please tell me if you not.
Okay, you are breaking up quite heavily. You might want to try chat.
Is like one bar service Dameron Scott Route 1 situation. So what I think I think give me a couple minutes. So.
Okay. You don't need sharing anymore. All right. Well, we'll see if Kendra Joe gets to put that in chat or gets into better reception. Tom, Bob, and,
Roy,
yeah.
one thing, just
Sure, Jeff.
one last thought. I think also we need to have a discussion about funding models and how you want and what your intention is to fund these projects, because with the MCA grant, the towns are going to have to, there's a town contribution that they're going to have to come up with.
Right.
And I think we need to look at those numbers and come up with some numbers so we can give the people that are going to be responding to the RFP some idea on what it is that you're looking for.
Mhm. And that was a question I asked Kendra Joe when right after a little bit after the 4th. And as I understand it, it's basically there's a match of $700 per premise that is included, that is grant eligible. Is that correct for this next round at least? So
yeah, it depends on how you are planning to fund the project. If it's a utility, town owned, or if you're just doing it with a partner. So
okay, so the was it Donna?
Yes, Donna.
Yeah, she had mentioned, and I don't know if this is still the case. So maybe, I know John Doherty is sort of the point person for it, but Donna had said that there was that Camden and Brooklyn, not Camden and Brooklyn, Brooklyn and
Brooklyn and Sedgwick.
There we go. Brooklyn and Sedgwick had applied for a grant for the match for the MCA grant through Hancock County, which was going to be in the neighborhood of $888,000. And is that still a funding mechanism that is possible for those types of things?
Yes, it is.
So hypothetically, if we identify the areas that are going to be grant eligible because they're unserved or underserved right now, assuming we can still make Connect already, then we would know roughly how many premises would fit that bill. And then we could hypothetically reach out to Hancock County for a match for that. Is that how that would work?
Yeah,
okay.
That is exactly how it would work. You'd identify the eligible locations, and then you would go back to the county commissioners and ask them for a
X
share
of dollars.
The money that they've set aside for broadband in the county.
And then obviously RFPs come back. We know what the big dollar figure is. That part comes out if we're awarded that for that, correct? I assume it's not a guarantee. Hancock County has to sort of say yes.
Yeah, they would look at the same. Well, you'd have to present them with a very similar package to what Brooklyn and Sedgwick did.
Mhm.
and what you're doing, what you're building to.
Yep.
They'd want to know who your partner is, because you're going to need to have identified by that point who the partner is in the project, who's going to build it, and all of those details. And then you would get an allocation of funding from the county.
Okay.
And we can, and Roy, we can help you with that. That's
Yeah.
something we can do and something we can help with.
But just do the simple math and then we'll go to Bob here. So
Yep.
RFP total, assuming we get money from Hancock County for match, subtract that out of the RFP total, and we then, we're applying for the grant. So we operate on the assumption, hopefully, that we get the grant. And then the difference of the match and the grant money that we're applying for from the RFP total should be the amount that we would be asking to borrow technically. And
Yes.
that's what we would be going back to the communities to ask them to authorize. And so then the big question is, does that amount, when financed, lead to payments that are in excess of what we think we would be getting back based on the take rate?
Mhm.
And
Yep.
that's how we would have to sell it to the communities. Bob?
Yeah, and this is more of a question for Jeff. Jeff, we really won't know until the route miles are established on the fiber drop, on the fiber route that it's going to take. Additionally, mapping the fiber route to the individual homes, that would give us a very, very close ballpark figure of what the monies that are involved on it, correct?
Yes, we can,
All right.
we can give a rough estimate of the total cost of the project.
Okay. And therefore, we can probably go to the towns with that number to saying, yes, it needs to be refined, but these are the rough numbers to get their take on it, what their feelings are.
I think that would be wise to sort of test the water, if you will.
Absolutely.
Yeah, and
Absolutely.
determine, yeah, yes.
Yeah. I mean, I'm sorry I haven't been much of a of a worker like Roy is, but I've had 2 heart attacks, so we're trying to get the ball back in the court here.
No, don't worry about that, Bob.
Yeah.
So yeah, I think it behooves us to push as much information out to the communities as it becomes available. So for example, Mission Broadband, Jeff, you said you can get a pretty good estimate of, with the new mapping, of what's served, what's grant eligible. And then we have rough road miles, right? We have rough network miles right now, and we have 75,000. So that's something that we'll be sharing at the next outreach anyway. This is like the $6 1/8 million, estimate that's rough right now, but we're working on refining that. So,
Right.
but we won't know concrete numbers until the RFPs come back, because that's the first time we'll be dealing with actual dollar amounts.
That's correct.
And I'm sorry, Jeff.
Go ahead.
With the RFPs, I mean, that's the first iteration. You get a price back and then you negotiate from that price, saying, can you do better? I mean, I've done this for like almost 46 years, 48 years. And you never accept the first response back from the bidders on it. I mean, they're probably gonna go high on it, and then it's the job to have them negotiate a little downward on that. I mean, they're looking for a decent profit margin, and I don't blame them, but the issue, the real issue is, like you said, Roy, is getting it past the voters. You need their buy-in on it. Without it, it's not going anywhere.
The other thing that I can offer up to the group is we do have a model that we can do with some of the numbers not being absolutely confirmed, but we can give you a rough idea of how this will all look and what you'll need for a take rate, what the funding sources potentially could be, how much will have to be financed. And I'll do 2 things while I'm gone. Is I'll ask for our group to start doing a new map, updating the map. Secondly, to start putting together some numbers for you to look at in terms of do a model for what the financing would look like with a utility-owned network in both towns.
And not to short circuit anything here, but if you think it's too much to ask for the sort of plan B, if you will, as well as the plan A in this RFP, would it make sense then just to, once we've identified, because by then we'll know which areas are underserved, which would be the most eligible for future rounds of grant funding. Does it make more sense just to go for the whole project right now and just drop it if it's not going to be viable for the towns because of the cost, and then quickly turn around and send out an additional RFP or new RFP, basically, unfortunately, reject the responses to date and go out for a smaller project based on a
I think-
future round?
Roy, I think they will factor that in because they're
Okay.
they're gonna do, as I said before, they will do the mapping. They
Okay.
will know what areas are eligible and what areas aren't. They're gonna come back to you with a proposal to do the whole thing, and this is how we will do it.
Okay.
So I think I would leave it. That's what we've done. We're doing a similar type project with the Winterport, Prospect, Frankfort, Stockton Springs group,
Mhm.
and they have fairly significant areas in those towns that are not eligible.
Mhm.
So the company they chose is working with a design to build around those areas, if you will.
Okay.
And that's part of the proposal that they put together.
So then I guess my ask would be if there's a way to incorporate that sort of notion that prioritize the unserved grant eligible areas, and an option for targeting those areas as opposed to the whole project.
Well,
If like you said, building around.
Yeah. And and Roy, we can clarify in the RFP where the eligible locations are, where the areas that are not eligible are, and then we
Mhm.
can go from there.
Because my feeling is it's better to get, even though we've operated under the assumption of doing the entirety of the Scudic Peninsula from the beginning, if it comes to getting grant money now and getting a project, it's better to get a smaller subset of the entire peninsula and get the process started, get something on the ground and get it running. And then as it becomes self-sufficient to try to expand it later. That's better than getting nothing in my mind.
Mhm.
So.
Yes.
All right. And just as an aside, I did talk to Julie Ginn over in Steuben, and she thinks there will be support to join in the future. And the good thing about Steuben, from the perspective of grant funding, is they have no spectrum at all in Steuben. It is entirely consolidated communications. So it's all DSL or satellite. So that's a big swath of network as well, because like Goldsboro, Steuben is a tall, long town with a lot of long roads and a lot of long driveways, but at least we'd be dealing with pretty much entirely unserved areas. So that's just an aside for the future. Okay. I think we'll leave that for now. Goldsboro and Winter Harbor report nothing specific there. Information gathering, Hancock County Commissioners funding opportunity. That's what I was asking about with the following on the discussion with Donna from Sedgwick and Brooklyn about the match for the grant funding. So that sounds promising, that is still an option. Any thoughts before we move on to selling the project to the community? Okay. And I just put this in there as a discussion point because I think it's worth starting to think about what type of things we want to start doing as soon as we have information to share, to start trying to generate, I don't know, I hate to use the word pre-order, but get some interest and get some data back on people who would want to sign up for this kind of a service right away once it becomes available. Just trying to again drum up business, as it were, and interest, so that we can, when it does inevitably come up to a vote for borrowing, that we have people that are educated and motivated and out there, willing to tell their neighbors, about what a great thing this is that we're going to build. So. We don't have Mike's little card to show you're muted, but you're muted, Bob. There
Yep.
you go.
Getting there is half the fun. Pre-orders are good, shows commitment on that. And it also shows where we stand. I mean, when the rubber meets the road, then this is it. So if the interest is there, if you build it, they will come, hopefully.
Yeah.
Yep.
I think I having done, a lot of door knocking last summer, I mean, it's not the end of the world if I wanted to hit the road and start knocking on doors and handing out literature or, talking to people. Certainly, I think it would make sense, again, to target those underserved or unserved areas, just because I would say somebody who's stuck with DSL at the end of Reading Road in Gouldsboro Point, for example, like Ray Jones, as I picked on him at the meeting, he's a good voice that I want to try and get him on board. He's on the budget committee, he's involved, I won't say that he's, because I don't know the dynamics, but he's certainly somebody whose voice is heard in Gouldsboro. So, that's definitely a poorly served area. So, things that the committee, maybe we make phone calls to people. There's phone number information is notoriously unreliable. There's no real phone books anymore, but just trying everything we can to reach out. Maybe a future mailing has something like, I don't want to get into return postage, but, just to get feedback from people.
Well, I tell you what, I got the glossy sheet on in the mail. It was stuffed in my post office box, so that was great. So
Tom?
Yeah, just a couple of things. I was thinking some things that came up at the Gouldsboro meeting. One is, we know that the incumbents, at least Consolidated and Spectrum, they're going to be putting on a hard press. You're already seeing some stuff in the news and or advertisements and stuff. They're going to be putting on the hard press. They're going to be coming in. They're going to try to get lower costs. And one of the individuals there said, "Well, what's in it? What's in it for me? I can get this service from the incumbent at this price, and initially it may look as though the price we're offering is a little bit more, but as was pointed out, what they missed was that we're going to be giving money back to the communities. The incumbents are never going to be doing that. So I think we need to be prepared to be able to explain how that works and how it may look on the surface as though they're giving you a deal, but they're not. So that's one thing.
Yeah.
The other one is this issue of the so-called summer residents, and if they subscribe, what's going to be? Are they going to have to pay the same rate throughout the year for the time that they're not here? So I think we need to be thinking about how to answer that, because as you know, there's a substantial number of them. and a substantial number of them want better internet, but they may have pushback on paying the rate throughout, 12 months. So that's just a
Right.
couple of things.
So that reminds me of a question for Jeff. Now, we're sort of approaching this from the open access dark fiber broadband network model that DBU has done. And in that case, of course, they have Pioneer Broadband and they're negotiating with other ISPs. And I know that from my discussion that things like a seasonal rate or a seasonal shutdown, that's something that we would be discussing with the ISP as part of our agreement for them to serve over our network. But that's not part of building the network. So my question is, I don't remember exactly, does the RFP cover, does it include a request from internet service providers to approach us to operate over this network? Because I know there's operating the network, there's building the network, there's maintaining it, there's that sort of things. But does it include garnering interest from ISPs to serve customers via the network?
I guess that would be up to you in terms of determining how you want to structure the RFP. I think what we recommended when we first talked was that you do it with your preference being identified in the RFP, but you are open to all
Right.
suggestions. So
Right.
that you could get one from Spectrum that could say, here's what we have for plans for the two towns, and this is what we would propose doing, and here's the cost.
Right.
So that you would get a number of options. That way you've got all the various options, so you can answer many of the questions that you'll get from your residents. Well, did you think about this? Did you think about that?
Right.
So
Would it be possible to include a request from internet providers to serve if the end result is an open access dark fiber network? Could that be part of the wording to ask for internet service providers, for example, the likes of Pioneer? I may not be Pioneer, but they serve as an ISP, which is beyond the scope of construction, but to gauge interest of internet providers to say what they would offer over if it ends up being an open access network.
I think if you define what you want in terms of a network, you're going to get people who are going to say, we will design this network to be this. And they will do what you are asking them to do. And that's what you're looking for. You're looking for a partner that is going to build an open access network, operate it, because you're not going to operate it. I mean, that's my assumption. And they will take care of it. They'll maintain it. They'll do that so that you have a true partner in operations, building of the network.
Right. But I'm not talking about just the building of the network. I'm talking about once the network exists, if it is in fact an open access network, the likes of which DBU has, then comes the question of who provides the internet service via that network. Now, so far we're talking about building and maintaining, getting the network off the ground, but that does not translate directly into whoever builds it becoming the internet service provider that then serves the customers. Bob?
Yeah, that comes under the heading of peering arrangements. Who are you gonna peer with? I mean, if you're supplying your own power, your own box on that, who are you gonna pair with? Okay, the carriers, for instance, pair with maybe a dozen different other providers within, like, say, an 80-20 basis, that most of the traffic is within a geographic area. But if you're gonna go, say, international or something like that, you gotta be able to peer with somebody else who will take your traffic and consequently offer a service as well. Now, if you're doing your own homegrown internet service that you're gonna supply the power behind internet, if you're gonna become your own ISP, then you got some work to do. Jeff, have any success on the pairing arrangements or?
Did you ask Danny Sullivan that question when you were talking to him? I believe they only have Pioneer on their network. I don't think there's anybody else that's jumped on to
They were-
provide services.
They were negotiating with additional providers, but I don't know that they've added them yet.
Yeah,
Yeah.
But that's obviously Pioneer built their network. Pioneer is, and the primary certainly internet provider on their network. But so it may be the case that whoever builds it also is an ISP who would then serve over the network. But but I don't think that's a guarantee. You might have somebody who's building it, who's builds networks, but might not be an internet service provider. Am I wrong?
I guess that's your decision. I don't know that I can tell you.
So
I
my
would,
que-
I would
okay.
look, this is the way I would do it. I would look for somebody to build it, operate it, and maintain it. That's what I'd be looking for. I would not want to have somebody build it, then somebody separately who's really not familiar with it to operate it and maintain it. I think you need to look for one partner to do all of the above. And I
Okay.
think that's what they have with Pioneer. Pioneers, hey, they built it. They are maintaining it, my understanding. And they also provide the service over it. It also is open for others to come in and provide service, but I don't know of anybody that's done that at this point.
Okay. So you would operate under the assumption that whoever builds it would also be an internet service provider, at least at the outset, who would service the customers who are signed up for service with the network.
That would be my recommendation, yes. I
Okay.
think that's what you want. That would make it, I think it would make it simpler on your end.
Oh,
And I think
yeah,
I think
that's fine.
I
Yeah.
think that's what you want, Roy. I think you want simplicity.
I
and
just
not
wasn't sure if
complicated.
I've got to jump off here, but I just wasn't sure if the internet service provider aspect was part of the RFP at all. That's what I was getting at. If that was something that had to be specified or brought in separately, but if it's part of the process as it stands right now, then I don't think we have to worry. It's safe. It's
It is.
easier, like you said, just to start with somebody. And if you want to bring somebody on afterwards, great.
Right.
But as long as we've
Yeah.
got somebody to start with, because I don't want to build a network and then have it sitting there and not have an internet provider who can, because I would imagine as soon as we can have some section up and running, we would want to start signing people up so the money can start coming in and
Yeah,
paying it off.
typically that's typically the way they do it. As they
Yeah.
build it, they start selling on it.
Okay.
The sections. And then, you will have an open access network that will be available for others to come in if they so desire to
Yeah.
provide service over your network.
Right. And certainly I would encourage people or providers to come in and compete over that network to offer different services over that network. That would certainly be the goal, because we know competition is good for customers usually.
Yep.
So,
Yep.
all right. So that answers, I think, all my questions. Anybody have any other business to?
Well, this is Bob again. Let me see if I'm muted or not. Yep. With respect to the connection to CERT, we were able to find out if that was a type 2 connection because it seemed awfully high.
I don't know. I haven't gotten back to their network guy yet, but I don't think we have to worry about Scudic for this part of it, because I just signed us up for 500 meg.
Okay.
for $60 more. So instead of, 600, we're paying 660 or something like
Right.
that. So going from 40 to 500, we're pretty good. So I think we're safe to leave that out of this project for now.
Okay,
So this makes it simpler.
sounds good.
It wouldn't be grant eligible because we've already got fiber.
This is true.
So Roy, let me summarize what I need to get for you. One,
Okay.
the first thing is to get the updated draft of the RFP back to you, and I'll do that tomorrow as I promised.
And I'll
Then
send that out to the committee.
Perfect, good. And then I will have our people start doing an updated map of Gouldsboro and Winter Harbor. And then we will start putting together the pieces for the financial model based on what you're looking for. And third, we will start the discussions with the Hancock County Commissioners in terms of what the funding they have available is and what they might have set aside for the towns of Winter Harbor and Gouldsboro.
Sounds good. Also, I'll just add on the funding side that I think it makes sense to do this. I spoke with Millard Billings, who is affiliated with Hancock County Commissioners, and he said they have grant money to connect the residents in Township 7. Of course, we have to go through a little bit of Township 7 to get to Gouldsboro Point. And if Hancock County has money to get its people that are living in Township 7 added in there, probably extend them. I don't know what money they have available, but if they've got money that makes it no cost or very little cost to add that on, I think that makes sense.
I'll talk to Millard about that because
Okay.
he is the unorganized territory
Right.
manager for the county, and I think there was funding that came from the solar farms.
I think
That
you
will-
said TIF money or something like
Yeah,
that.
There
it's
was.
probably TIF money.
Yeah, it is. It is.
So
We
if
see
So-
that, we're seeing that in Penobscot County as well, that
Okay.
strategy of using TIF funds.
Yeah.
it's not a big chunk of land and not a big chunk of road. So if it's something small that can fill in a gap, it makes sense if we're already going to go a little ways into Township 7 for our
Okay.
purposes.
I'll reach out to Millard. I've worked with him before, so I'll
Okay,
see what they have.
very good. Thank you. Everybody good? Look at that. We kept it on time today. Did you have anything you wanted to add, Kendra Jo, or?
Now that I've stopped driving, apologies for that.
It's okay.
The only couple of things that I would add is, one, it sounded like you were talking a little bit like a phased approach under public ownership of potentially getting grant funding to build out the unserved areas and then leveraging those subscribers and the revenue from that to maybe extend into underserved or served territory and kind of that, phase dynamic. Some providers are open to that. Others, I don't think they've been interested.
Okay.
On the provider contractor piece, I would just say that, even for providers that don't do construction, like Pioneer does construction and Consolidated has their own workforce, they have their construction partners. And so that would be their subcontractors, and they would, submit that as well. The only thing that I would add on the RFP is I don't know, Jeff, if Mission Broadband has done this on an open access network RFP, but potentially asking the recipients or the respondents to include what other ISPs would be willing to partner on an open access model. And the only reason I flagged that is one of the stumbling blocks with DBU, and the reason why they've been trying to get a provider on for a while and talking to providers for a while is every contractor ISP, it seems like they build their network in the way that they want to operate on. And so to maybe position that response in a way that they're building the network with other providers in mind, and it might change the technology that they're putting in place and the way that they build it and potentially the cost. So if there's some way to, not just say, we're interested in an open access model, but actually encourage bringing on an ISP and a partnered ISP from the beginning, I think it also gets to what you're talking about, Roy, of that competition. If you have a provider who comes in first and, takes that first 25% take rate, and then you get another provider on, I don't know that you're still getting that same competition sense, or even if the interest or, and this is starting to become my opinion, but if it's as attractive to another provider, right? Because I feel like that the easy selection of people who really wanted that take rate, wanted that connection early on has already been scooped up. And when in areas and countries that we see open access really work well, like in Scandinavian countries, those providers are on from the beginning, and so they are competing for the first customer to the last customer. So I don't know if Mission Broadband has done an RFP like that, but just something to consider when we are talking about an open access model.
Can do that. Kendra Jo, we can incorporate language in the RFP that will ask for that kind of information up front.
Right.
Awesome.
Kendra Jo,
Thank
this
you.
is Bob.
I'm gonna have to jump off, so Mark, if it's okay with you, can I make you the host? So you can just end the meeting when it's all done?
Okay,
Thank you. Have a good night, everybody.
you too now. Take care, Roy. Hey, Kendra Jo, this is Bob again. Wouldn't that affect the payback rate? I mean, you got infrastructure cost, which is a hard cost, and then you have a monthly bill to the ISP. So with that in mind, wouldn't that affect the payback to the towns to satisfy that debt?
Yeah, I mean, I think that depending on how competitive they are in pricing, it would impact the amount of funding they're able to return from each subscriber, unless you set up, a threshold minimum of
Okay.
how much you would be wanting, or a percentage threshold. Again, we
Right.
haven't seen a true open access model play out in Maine, where
Right.
you have multiple providers actively working and on a take rate that would pay back a debt service. So it's just things to consider. And I think it's balancing, is your priority ensuring that everyone has access to more than one provider on this network, or is the priority getting folks connected and getting that debt service taken care of? I think you
Right.
could still get the debt service. You would be working through two providers, and you'd probably have to set some thresholds to ensure
Right.
that, at a minimum, you're getting back, they're making what they want to make, they need to make, and you're making back what you need to pay back your debt.
So I mean, that's really something to consider, and it may not be viable to offer that open access. So, and that's something that we really need to consider.
Bob, I think that was why we recommended that you look at all the options.
Yep.
So, you'll have, hopefully a plan B if what you're looking for
Right.
is just not financially feasible.
Sure. I mean, it's a tough decision. And in the case of Winter Harbor is about 70% wired with Spectrum. And one of the, I guess, the board members of Spectrum sits or has political influence in the town of Winter Harbor, hence the 70% wiring. So I don't know how wide or large Winter Harbor will be on that. Gouldsboro is really the town that needs the service. I mean, yes, there are pockets of Winter Harbor that don't have service. Is that a major factor? Yes or no? Are people willing to switch to a homegrown? I mean, I'll be frank with you. I worked for Spectrum. That was my last job before retiring. And so I'm carrier agnostic. I don't care what solution you use, as long as it's viable. I mean, if it's a better deal than people, I mean, what Dan Sullivan has been able to pull off is a miracle, and more power to him. my feeling is connect with his network, just extend his network down to here. So that way we can all benefit with the number of users, and the payback is somewhat more palliative to take. I mean,
Bob, I just did the numbers quickly.
mm,
About 15% of Winter Harbor is eligible. Well over 50% of Gouldsboro is eligible. Yes,
so Gouldsboro will carry Winter Harbor, so that gives you 65% roughly, putting the two together. If you want to play numbers like that. So,
it actually goes down. I hate to tell you the number. It's 43%.
okay,
44% when you put the two towns together.
that might be a tough sell, who knows? But we won't know until the RFP comes back.
Yep,
And we have some hard numbers to play with.
absolutely.
Well, Jeff, I thank you for your time.
All
And
right.
Kendra Joe,
Thank
thank you. All right, thanks, guys.
Thanks, everybody. Bye now.
Okay,
Thank you.
bye-bye. I guess we're adjourning at 5:07.